So this is Theron Jacobson, Director of Public Works with the City of Verona. This is the public information meeting for the Lincoln Street Stormwater Management Facility. The photo is in the background here of an existing pond that the city owns and maintains that's off a cross-country road, just for a visual representation. The meeting logistics: if you're participating by phone, you'll only be able to listen to the presentation. If you are using a computer, do not use the raise hand feature during the presentation. We'll take all questions at the end of the presentation, which then I'll promote you to talk at that time. Everyone will be muted throughout unless you are a presenter or asking a question at the end. If you are asking questions at the end, please limit the time to statements and questions, allow others to speak. And if you have a lot of questions, we can obviously come back to you also. And if you need to maximize the presentation on your screen, just use that vertical bar in the middle there to maximize the presentation. The agenda for tonight, we'll go over the presenters, the project team, the project overview, the restoration, the tree planting, other city watershed improvements, communication, the anticipated construction schedule, and like I said before, we'll take questions at the end. The presenters tonight: myself, Theron Jacobson, the Public Works Director. I also have Mike Wagner. He's a water resource engineer, project manager with Brown and Caldwell. He was a primary design consultant. And then we also have AECom, Carla Fisher, water resource engineer / city engineer, was a sub-consultant for some design elements on this pond. The project team, I basically just introduced them. The City of Verona is the owner. Brown and Caldwell and AECom were the design engineers. The general contractor is to be determined. The bid opening did occur today, but we are analyzing those, and this will be awarded at a future council meeting. And the City of Verona construction team will be the feet on the ground that will be doing the inspection during construction and will be the point of contacts. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mike Wagner to present the project and go over the technical elements of that. So Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Theron. So again, Mike Wagner with Brown and Caldwell. And just to start off with, we have an overview figure on the screen. This is to help hopefully orient people to where the project is and give a bit of an introduction. So the project is located adjacent to the city center building and kind of south of the Hometown Days grounds. And then it's northeast of the Lincoln Street channel. And so that's why it's referred to as the Lincoln Street Stormwater Facility. And what the project will consist of is we have a diversion dam. So we have flow coming down the Lincoln Street channel, and there would be an earthen berm that would divert flow into a wet pool. And so Theron's illustrating it a bit right there. It would come into that wet pool. That's where we'd have settling of larger particles and get some of those larger pollutants out. And from there, it would flow up to the northeast into a bioretention area. And that's shaded green. And so that bioretention area is an engineered soil area that's vegetated, and it would promote the water to soak through that layer to an underdrain system, to collect it, take it to an outlet structure, and then it would return back into the Lincoln Street channel. And that flows down further to the south to Badger Mill Creek. So I think we can move on to the next slide. Again, just a bit of an overview. This is a water quality treatment facility. That's the purpose of the project, is to remove stormwater pollutants. And associated with that, there is a grassed path that goes through the northeast part of the project area that will be rerouted as part of the project. So it will remain, it just will be rerouted. We'll get into a little more details on that. There will be some tree plantings, and The majority of the project area will be restored with native grass plantings. This is a picture of the project area from last spring. It's looking from near the outlet of the facility to the north and northwest. So the city center building is in the background. Kind of the top right is where the Hometown Days area is. And then the channel is on the left-hand side. And so I think you can see the majority of the project site is turf grass right now. So we can move on. This is kind of getting into the construction access, site access. So one thing to point out, there's a thin blue line on the north side. And so we mentioned that grass path that goes through the area. That will be diverted around the site during construction. So kind of as Theron drew up there on the screen, there will be a construction fence along that edge of the construction site to maintain safety, and then divert that path around the project area. Primary access for the site will be off of Lincoln Street. So that area circled there, it will come from the west into the project area. So there will be a decent amount of truck traffic hauling excavated material from the site, delivering material to the site, and that primary access will come from Lincoln Street. There are traffic control requirements as part of the plans. So signs, stop signs, signage, warning of trucks entering and leaving, that type of signage. There also is a secondary access coming from the north off of Verona Avenue and through the Ice Center area and across the Military Ridge State Trail. So again, that is a secondary access that's to be used in a more limited fashion, maybe some delivery of material, maybe some contractor pickup trucks, but it's not the primary trucking in and out access. There are, again, traffic control requirements on that area, particularly with the Military Ridge Trail to maintain safety in that area. So the goal is to give the contractor area to work and an ability to get in and out of the site from both areas, but also maintain pedestrian and vehicle access. Continue on. And so again, Lincoln Street, it will remain open at all times. It is the primary access, and there will be increased truck traffic. It will be going up north to Verona Avenue and to truck routes from there. And then the secondary access is from East Verona Avenue and through the community park on the north side of the site. Continue on. Restoration. So mentioned before, there would be some trees, and then the majority of the area would be native plantings, native grasses, sedges, wildflowers, and there will be a couple different seed mixes used. So in the area around the perimeter of the wet pond, that area, the water will fluctuate and it'll be a little wetter. That will be a floodplain, a wet mesic seed mix. And similar with the bioretention area, that's an area that will be wet frequently, and those side slopes close to the bioretention area, again, a wet seed mix, a floodplain seed mix. The upper side slopes, as you kind of move up towards the Hometown Day grounds or kind of up in elevation away from the project, would be a more upland prairie seed mix. So like a woodland seed mix, a savanna seed mix. Continue on. There will be tree plantings. This was coordinated with the city forester, and we identified areas along the north slope of the pond for tree plantings. There's several different species included on the plantings, both deciduous and conifers. And we got the next slide helps to illustrate and tie that together. This just gives a real broad overview of the restoration, but the tree areas, there's 3 different groups of trees on the north slope. And so those locations are identified there. A couple things, wanted to make sure that we're able to maintain the site and get equipment and mowing vehicles along the side slopes and that it is maintainable, so that the tree location's based on that. Then again, this shows the wet pool area and the bioretention area. That wet pool will be an open pool of water, and the perimeter will be planted. But then the bioretention area, that will be planted, and then the perimeter will be planted as well. The path we talked about again earlier on the north side, that existing gravel path will be replaced. Then as it moves further to the southeast, it transitions to a grassed path. And that grassed path will be relocated around the perimeter of the project area, and then tie into the existing path. So the path will be maintained and continue after construction as well as during construction. It'll just be relocated a little bit. Within the watershed, the city has done quite a bit of work over the last 10 years or so. And that includes in areas both real close to the Lincoln Street project we're talking about tonight. So kind of the first two projects in the area, the Lincoln Street Channel Phase 1 and Phase 2 rehabilitation. So Phase 1 occurred in 2013, and there's a picture on the top of the screen that's just downstream of the culverts at Lincoln Street. So that's a picture from construction there. And then on the bottom of the screen, as you move downstream from Phase 1, so going away from the city center and down towards Badger Mill Creek, that was restored and rehabilitated in 2017. In 2018, the city did dredging at Silent Street Pond, and then also the design work for this project commenced. So the design schedule has been a bit lengthy. One of the real components of that is permitting with the Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Army Corps. So I've worked through that and excited to get to where we are today. In the meantime, the city also did some other projects up at Gateway Pond with conveyance improvements. In 2019, in 2020, pond sampling, and then also the dredging of the Harmony Pond. Then we get to 2021, where we're looking at construction of this current project. And then the city will also be investigating the Prairie Heights Pond and the potential need for dredging of that pond. Theron, if there's anything you want to add in on projects in the watershed?
No, that's a very good summary. The only thing I would add is all of these projects that Mike just identified are all within this, call it this larger local watershed that the city has, which is a figure that Mike will describe later on. This is just the most downstream point in that watershed. But otherwise, that was a good summary, Mike, and I'll give you the floor, and here's the watershed figure for you.
Yep, so this is the project watershed, and Theron's circling the Lincoln Street detention basin location, and draining to this area is about 700 acres of land, and that's in that black outline. So there's areas extending up north along Main Street, up to the Prairie Oaks area, the Redden Soccer Complex area up there. So that water all drains down into the Lincoln Street Channel, and then ultimately with the construction of this pond will flow through the facility. There's also some of the downtown areas along Verona Avenue that will also drain in there, kind of extending west over to where the Sugar River Elementary redevelopment project's going on. So that also is part of this watershed. So it's a big area that will drain into the project area and has a lot of, so there will be a lot of kind of runoff coming into the area and a lot of stormwater pollution that we can capture and remove.
And just to add on to that also, it's a lot of areas within the city that don't have stormwater treatment facilities installed currently. So that'll be a major benefit, one for the city and the environment and the receiving waters downstream of here, more specifically the Badger Mill Creek. Yeah,
and so to start talking about some of those pollution control benefits, there are requirements for stormwater pollution control. People may or may not know that, but development requirements, so both redevelopment and new development, have requirements to reduce the amount of total suspended solids leaving the site. So redevelopment, an example of that would be you have a parking lot and you want to reconstruct that parking lot, or you have a existing commercial building and you want to tear it down and build a brand new commercial building. And so that's an example of redevelopment. And those sites need to look at and remove about 40% or more of the TSS from the site. New development, that's where you have a farm field, an open land, and that's being, a new subdivision, a new business park, whatever you have. And there's a higher requirement for pollution control. There's not much undeveloped area in this watershed. Again, it is primarily developed. And one of the components that's somewhat special to this area, it also impacts other areas, is thermal control. So Badger Milk Creek and Sugar River are cold water fisheries. They support trout, and trout are sensitive to water temperature. And what can happen with stormwater runoff is it can raise the temperature of the streams, and that can cause problems and issues with trout. So one of the requirements for both redevelopment and new development is to include thermal control, so there isn't a negative impact. And then along with that, Badger Milk Creek and the Sugar River ultimately will have a TMDL developed, and that's a total maximum daily load. And what that means is there will be a requirement for what the maximum amount of pollutants, in this case, the amount of total suspended solids or total phosphorus that can be discharged into the creek or the river, and have that river or creek still support its uses, so be fishable and swimmable. And ultimately, all the land within that watershed that contributes to the creek or the river will be assigned an amount of pollution that they can generate. So the city of Verona, the stormwater system, will have a maximum daily load that can be discharged into Badger Mill Creek and the Sugar River for TSS and total phosphorus. And this stormwater management facility can be used to help meet those future TMDL requirements. So it's looking ahead, trying to make improvements and meet those future requirements. And it can also be used to meet the redevelopment total suspended solids reduction requirements. So if a facility, a property upstream in the watershed wants to redevelop, this project can be used to meet those requirements that they would be under. Anything you want to say, Theron, on the requirements of that?
No, I think that covers it good. I mean, regarding the TMDL and the timing of that is completely unknown. That is all within the DNR's hands. I know Marty tracks that on our end, as he's a part of the Upper Sugar River Watershed Association, but it's on the DNR's list, but it's not at the top of their list. These TMDLs are exhausting studies, and they do take a lot of time, meaning years, to plan, prepare, facilitate, and then ultimately get them to a published standpoint. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to add, Mike.
Okay, so if we go on, and what amount of pollution control are we looking at from this project, and how is it doing that? So we have a wet pond, and in that wet pond, there will be settling. The water will come into the wet pond carrying pollutants, and in that pool of water, it allows the heavier particles to settle out to the bottom. So that wet pool will have a depth of about 5 feet deep, and kind of the first 3 feet of that is the settling area, so where the pollutants are settling out. And then at the bottom is the sediment storage area, and that can accumulate up to about 2 feet of sediment. So the city has been dredging some of the ponds that have accumulated sediment, and that's some of the maintenance that is done over time. That also is a sign that these wet ponds are capturing pollutants and settling to the bottom and taking that out of our waterways. The second part of the pollution removal is then the bioretention area. So in this area, the water comes from the wet pond and flows into the bioretention area. And then we have water can pond on the top and then start and flow through and down and filter through that engineered soil layer. The engineered soil layer is about 2 feet thick. And then beneath that is a stone layer. And in that stone layer is a drain tile. And so that water can flow through the engineered soil into the stone layer, be collected by the drain tile and go out to the channel. There may be a little bit of infiltration into the ground that occurs, but that'll be limited at this site as there's high groundwater. So it just won't allow much infiltration to occur. And also as the water flows through that engineered soil and the stone layer, that's where thermal control can also happen. So that soil stays cooler, it's not warmed up by the sun as much, and the stone underground is also not impacted and warmed up and can cool off that storm water as it filters through. And so overall on this project, we're looking at a TSS removal of about 39 tons per year. And so that's a rate of about 67% of what's coming in is removed. So that's above that 40% target for redevelopment. So that was one of the goals of the project, was to make sure we were above that requirement. Then also TP, total phosphorus, will be removed, about 180 tons per year, or pounds per year, sorry. And that's at a rate of about 40%. So it's harder to remove phosphorus from stormwater. So that 40% removal rate is still a pretty good rate. It's just challenging to remove phosphorus. Next slide. So what are we looking at for a construction schedule? So the bidding just occurred. We had the bid opening earlier today. So again, the city is evaluating those bids and will be awarding the contract in March. Then after that, having a pre-construction conference with the contractor, and from there moving into construction in April. So that initial construction will look like staging at the site, starting to move equipment and material to the site, installing erosion control measures to keep construction site erosion from entering the stream. And from there, it'll move into more mass excavation and earthwork, digging out that material and starting to haul it off site. So picture from an example site of some of the equipment you might see excavators and dump trucks and other type of large earthwork equipment. Now this schedule, this is what our thoughts are, so that the contractor might be moving into the in-stream work in the channel in July. Again, this is dependent on their schedule. They may choose to rearrange the order a little bit or move things up or push things back. But that's what we're looking at. And then ultimately restoration in August. The substantial completion date for the project is September 15th. So that is when the contractor is to have the site finished up, so they can't be pushing it and too far into the fall. And so looking at August and September restoration of the site. The restoration won't occur overnight. It'll probably occur in kind of multiple stages, and it'll take some time for the grasses to grow in, particularly that native vegetation takes some time. So it's not going to just magically be wildflowers and a beautiful prairie overnight in the fall or next spring. It'll take a little bit of time and maintenance to do that. Have an example picture on the bottom right. That's a pond that was constructed a couple summers ago. And then that's the fall after, where the vegetation is starting to establish. It occurred in stages. So there's some areas where the grass is a little more bare and some areas where it grew in and was planted a little earlier. So it will take a little bit of time, and don't want to get anybody's expectations too high, but ultimately it should look as a native plantings on the side slopes and perimeter of the facility. And communication during construction. I don't know if Theron, did you want to cover that or?
Yeah, I mean, I can take the communication slide. So there is a project website that is on the city's website, and there's a future slide for that. If there's any questions that anyone has during construction, contact city project staff and Marty Cieslix, the primary contact. His information is on the website. And here is the website. So you just go to City of Verona webpage and go to Government Departments, Public Works Projects, and there is a Lincoln Street Stormwater Pond. Click on that link and there's a series of information and a figure of the project on there. Once we have a more defined construction schedule, we will update that on the website also. And then I will also communicate with the Verona Press prior to construction starting of when the exact date will occur. So otherwise, we will open the floor to questions for any of the attendees that are in the audience here. I'm going to take the pointer off so I can go to the other screen here. Discard. So bear with me here. I'm moving my mouse to get to the other screen.
Yeah, Theron, I'm going to just chime in.
Yep.
One quick way to find the web page is probably just put in Lincoln Street Storm Facility in the search box when you're on the homepage of the city website. It'll give you some choices there to get to where you want to go. So
Okay.
that's always an option too.
All right. Thanks, Marty. Tim Spencer, I'm going to allow you to talk. Good evening, Tim.
Hello, thank you, sir. Will you be adding the slide deck to that site, that website?
Yeah, I'm recording the presentation, so I will put this up there also. But the intent is put the presentation up also.
Okay, thank you, sir. So my first question is, over the last 5 years, there's been a couple of years where we had some major flooding south of that area, along Badger Mill Creek and then up into the yards of the people living on the west side, especially. I'm just wondering what the impact of this will be on that flooding. Is the thought that that'll help and sort of reduce that, or no impact, or what?
It'd be a net zero impact. This is a water quality device. So the goal is to divert the low flow storm events, or what we refer to as the first flush. And what that is you have a rain event. Say you got a rain event that's going to last 3 hours. I'm just using an example here. That first half hour of that rain event is what is going to kind of, don't want to use the word clean, but it's the way to describe it here. It's the water is going to hit the pavements. It's going to concentrate flow, and it's going to put pollutants in suspension. And ultimately, that's our target range of that storm, is that initial surge of runoff. It's not the tail end like on a flood event. It's the front end of the storm that we're trying to capture. So we're only diverting, I think it's less than the 1 year event, Carla, into the facility. If you could correct me if I'm wrong. Carla did all the hydraulic analysis.
Yeah, it's like about the 9-month event or so. So we actually we don't want to divert too much flow through there. I mean, number one, it's just going to go right through the pond, but that will kind of resuspend the solids. And plus, just from just a hydraulic perspective, it's good to get those bigger flows. That'll just bypass the pond completely, and that's what we want it to do.
Thank you. So when you're dealing with flood management, it's your flood management facilities need to be as empty as possible when the peak flow of that flood water is actually coming through the area you're looking at. You're trying to shave off that peak. And the unfortunate geographic location where Verona is, we're in the downstream end of the Badger Mill Creek watershed. The watershed size for Badger Mill Creek at this point is 20 square miles. 20 square miles. There's 640 acres in per square mile. The watershed for this facility is 700 acres, just a little over a square mile. So you can see the magnitude difference of the size of the watershed versus the amount of water we're trying to manage here. So floodplain wise, no, this is a water quality device. So hopefully that answers your question, Tim.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have some more. I'll just come back later.
Yep. I got one other question here and then I can come back to you.
Thanks.
Yep. I'm going to go to Samara.
Hi there.
Oh.
Hi there. So my question, I did have a similar question to Tim, but in thinking about not just the flooding, but just in sort of your, like an average rain event, I know that our area, we're down on Holiday Court, tends to have a higher water table. Just it takes on more water generally from the parks and just from being a little lower. So I'm wondering, Mike, you mentioned that there may be some infiltration into the soil, and I'm curious about two things. One, what acreage currently is that Lincoln Channel taking on? I know now it's going to be 700. Where are we right now, and how much will that increase? And then how do you anticipate that impacting just the overall drainage in this area, like at the end of Holiday? The ground, like our ground level water table, like at an average time or moderate rain.
Mike, I can take on the groundwater question if you want. It's more of a city perspective thing.
Okay, so the watershed size will not change. So currently that 700 acres drains into the Lincoln Street Channel and goes through that channel to Badger Mill Creek. So we're just gonna take the runoff coming through that channel and divert it into the facility. So the watershed itself, the area upstream, is not changing. And so then, yeah, Darren, if you want to handle the groundwater question, that is a little different.
Yeah, groundwater wise, that's one element that's really out of our control. So regarding the infiltration that Mike identified here will be an indirect element of the biofiltration area. This was not a designed infiltration facility. If we were to promote more infiltration, that layer would be deeper and thicker, and we would have tried to find a sand seam which would have a much higher rate that the soil will absorb the water. And there is not that on site, so we did not end up pursuing that. We do know groundwater levels have been fluctuating over the past couple of years. We've seen it on some of our projects and we know it in the areas. And that's just due to the precipitations that we've had, depending on how much snow we get each winter, how deep frost is each winter, and how spring runoff events occur. So some of it is out of our control. If that helps answer your question, it's not a detailed, definitive answer.
No, I get it. That's fine.
I can't guarantee anything, especially in stormwater, but we're not trying to promote additional infiltration. This area is known to be, it's wet. There's 2 open channels next to it. It is a lower point to the city. And it varies based on soil conditions within the area and where we are in the city, and adjacent lands, topography, the list can go on and on.
If you had to guess, would you say that having this would increase the likelihood of that ground level decrease, or really is, like you said, net zero kind of a neutral?
Do you want me to touch on the underdrain at all?
I'll get to that, Carla.
Okay.
As an engineer myself, that nothing's certain with groundwater conditions. You could ask other hydrologists, geotechnical engineers, and they're each going to give you a different opinion. That's a high risk endeavor of dealing with underground conditions. So I'm not going to answer that question, unfortunately, of putting myself or the city in a unique position, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
are, as part of the groundwater, the known groundwater levels at the site, there is a hydraulic gradient there, which kind of follows the slope of the land there, not as severe. But we are putting an under drain below the wet pool area to capture groundwater and release it through the outlet structure of the pond. So there isn't a uplift pressure on the clay liner that would potentially breach that and break the seal of the liner, because the goal is to hold water in the wet pool for water quality treatment, but we also need to protect it too. So we are anticipating groundwater levels to lower within the area of the footprint of the pond and the adjacent perimeter. Not as far down as where you are, probably around 1,000, 1,200 feet south, but there are metrics we are taking.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. We'll go back to Tim. Samara, if you could lower your hand just so I make sure you don't have another question. Thank you.
Thanks. I have several, so if you want me to stop at any point, just let me know. I think I know the answer to this question, but I need to double check. So there are some major flooding projects, flooding control projects going on northeast of this site, so Goose Lake, and then north of there in parts of Madison. And I just want to make sure there's nothing about those projects and decisions they might make that would impact this project. I'm just thinking it's too far out of the way, but just want to double check.
No.
Okay. And then the area to the east of this project, the area to the east of this project's pretty low. Will the construction be such that there won't be a chance of that east side of the retention pond sort of eroding away during events?
Yep, so to the east of the site is lower, and there is a delineated wetland over there actually. And so that is taken into account on our project, and we are staying out of that wetland area. On this figure, there's kind of a green line on the east side of the project, and so we're staying out of that.
You got
then
the Mike?
Yep.
Okay, it does show. Okay, thank you.
Then there is a berm along the east side of the facility, and that was part of the work AECOM helped with on designing the project. And that berm is designed to withstand the forces expected and to be constructed properly such that there isn't erosion and it is stabilized.
And to expand on that too, regarding flood flows and such forth, there's two types of flow in flood events. There's an effective area, and then there's an ineffective area that make up the entire floodplain width. Your effective area is a positive velocity location where water is moving. Your ineffective area is where water is a zero velocity. It's a low-lying land, but the water elevations are high enough that flood the lands. The area adjacent to and north in these areas adjacent to this project are in that more of that ineffective area on that edge of it. So you think of the core Badger Mill Creek for a large width has a positive velocity moving water. If you were in a canoe or a kayak or something, you're going to be moving with water, but certain low-lying lands are just going to be flooded because the elevation of the water is greater than the land. So every scenario is different. Every location is different. Every storm event makes the flows different, but this is on a low risk end. There's no guarantees, like I said, in stormwater, but it's about managing risks, and that's what we did here.
Okay. minor thing, but I'm used to not being able to really cross that Lincoln Street channel when it's wet, unless I want to get my feet wet. But it seems like based on where that wet pond is, we're now going to be able to cross. Is that the expectation? People
No,
can walk across there? No.
no, that we can't stop people from doing it, but it is not recommended. It is a stormwater feature. It is an open channel of water. Individuals use it, use discretion, use the walking pass, that's what they're there for.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I see no other questions from the audience. I will going once, going twice, 3 times. Done. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending the public information meeting for the Lincoln Street Stormwater Management Facility, and look for updates on the website and as construction nears. And everyone have a good night and a dry spring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.